Most people never ask that question because the answer is uncomfortable. Yet hidden behind every notification, every endless scroll, every impulse purchase, and every moment of instant gratification lies a force quietly reshaping behavior, attention, and desire. What makes this even more dangerous is that the loss of control rarely feels like a loss of control. It feels normal. Master Your Dopamine has become more than a slogan because millions of people are discovering that the battle for their future is not happening in some distant place. It is happening inside their own minds, one craving at a time. In Dopamine Nation, Anna Lemke exposes a paradox that defines modern life. Humanity has never had easier access to pleasure, yet anxiety, dissatisfaction, loneliness, and compulsive behaviors continue to rise. The reason is far deeper than most people realize. But there is one critical mechanism operating beneath every habit, every temptation, and every cycle of self-sabotage. Most people spend their entire lives reacting to it without ever understanding how it works. And when you discover what that mechanism is, many of the struggles that seem mysterious today will suddenly make perfect sense. The most surprising part is that the problem is not pleasure itself. The real problem is what happens when pleasure becomes unlimited. Because the same system designed to reward growth, survival, and achievement can slowly become the very thing that traps a person in patterns of dependence, distraction, and emptiness. And by the end of this journey, a deeper question will emerge. If modern pleasures are shaping your choices, your attention, and your emotions more than you realize, who is really in control? The pleasure trap, hidden in everyday life. The trap works best when it feels harmless. A few seconds checking a notification, a quick look at social media, one more episode before bed, a small online purchase after a stressful day. None of these actions seem dangerous on their own. In fact, modern culture often celebrates them as normal ways to relax, stay connected, or reward yourself. The problem begins when the brain starts adapting to a world where pleasure is available everywhere and at all times. For most of human history, rewards required effort. Food had to be found. Entertainment was limited. Comfort was not guaranteed. Today, an almost unlimited stream of stimulation sits in every pocket, waiting to deliver tiny bursts of excitement, novelty, and relief. At first, this feels like progress. Over time, something more subtle happens. The brain learns to expect constant rewards. Moments that once felt enjoyable begin to feel ordinary. Activities that require patience start to feel boring. Silence becomes uncomfortable. Waiting becomes frustrating. The threshold for satisfaction slowly rises without most people noticing. This is why someone can spend hours consuming content, switching between apps, checking messages, and still feel strangely unfulfilled at the end of the day. The issue is not a lack of pleasure. The issue is that pleasure has become so abundant that it loses its power to satisfy. One of the most dangerous aspects of this process is that it happens gradually. There is no dramatic warning sign, no obvious moment when control disappears. Instead, motivation weakens little by little while cravings quietly grow stronger. A practical way to recognize this pattern is to observe what happens during moments of stillness. If every free moment triggers the urge to reach for a screen, seek stimulation, or escape boredom, the brain may already be relying on external rewards more than it realizes. But this is only the surface of the problem. The next principle reveals a shocking reality that explains why chasing more pleasure often produces the exact opposite result people are seeking. Why more pleasure creates more pain. The reward you chase today can become tomorrow's burden. Common sense suggests that more pleasure should create more happiness. If something feels good, having more of it should make life better. Yet, countless people find themselves trapped in a cycle where greater access to pleasure leads not to fulfillment, but to frustration, restlessness, and emotional exhaustion. The reason lies in a hidden balancing system inside the brain. Every experience that produces pleasure creates an opposing reaction. The brain constantly works to maintain equilibrium. When a powerful reward pushes the system toward pleasure, an equal force begins pulling it back toward discomfort. This mechanism protects balance, but it also creates a consequence that most people never see coming. At first, the reward feels strong and satisfying. Then the brain adapts. What once felt exciting becomes normal. What once felt rewarding becomes expected. The same stimulus that previously delivered satisfaction now delivers less of it, forcing the person to seek more frequent, more intense, or more prolonged stimulation just to achieve the same feeling. This is where the cycle begins. The pursuit of pleasure gradually shifts into the avoidance of discomfort. Instead of seeking rewards because they feel extraordinary, people start seeking them because life feels worse without them. The scroll is no longer exciting. It simply prevents boredom. The entertainment is no longer deeply enjoyable. It simply masks emptiness. The reward no longer elevates mood. It merely restores a temporary sense of normality. This explains why someone can possess endless entertainment, unlimited content, and constant access to pleasure while feeling increasingly dissatisfied. The brain has not stopped responding. It has adapted. One practical lesson emerges from this understanding. The goal is not to eliminate pleasure from life. The goal is to stop flooding the brain with so much stimulation that ordinary experiences lose their ability to bring satisfaction. And yet, an even more surprising problem has emerged in the modern world. Many of the strongest addictions no longer look like addictions at all. They wear the disguise of everyday habits, making them far more difficult to recognize. The new face of addiction in the digital age. What looks normal is often what controls the most. Addiction is no longer confined to extreme or socially condemned behaviors. In the modern world, some of the strongest dependencies hide inside routines that appear completely harmless, even productive or socially encouraged. The most dangerous shift is that many people no longer recognize the moment when a habit stops being a choice and starts becoming a necessity. The digital environment has reshaped this boundary. Every app, platform, and service is designed around engagement, not necessarily harmful in isolation, but powerful when combined with constant availability and infinite content. The result is a system where attention becomes fragmented and impulse becomes automatic. Scrolling turns into reflex. Checking becomes unconscious. Switching between stimuli becomes the default mental state. What makes this form of addiction so difficult to detect is its subtlety. There is no clear collapse, no obvious breaking point. Instead, there is a gradual replacement of intention with reaction. Time begins to disappear without memory of how it was used. Focus becomes harder to sustain. Boredom feels intolerable. Even more concerning is how these behaviors are often justified. Productivity tools, entertainment breaks, social connection, information gathering. Each action appears reasonable on its own, but together they form a pattern of continuous stimulation that leaves little space for reflection or mental rest. The mind begins to lose its ability to sit still, and when stillness disappears, clarity disappears with it. This is where modern addiction becomes different from traditional addiction. It does not always destroy life outwardly. Instead, it slowly erodes internal experience. Motivation weakens. Satisfaction becomes rare. Presence becomes fragmented. Yet there is a deeper layer to this pattern that most people overlook. It is not only about what is consumed, but about what the absence of consumption begins to feel like. And that is where the real struggle begins, because once the mind becomes accustomed to constant stimulation, silence itself starts to feel like discomfort. The next principle reveals why deliberately choosing discomfort might be the only way to reverse this process and regain control. The power of voluntary discomfort. Comfort is not as harmless as it seems. Most people spend their lives trying to avoid discomfort at all costs. But in doing so, something unexpected happens. The brain becomes less capable of handling even small levels of challenge. The same system that once built resilience through effort slowly weakens when effort is removed. This is where voluntary discomfort changes everything. There is a hidden paradox in human psychology. Controlled exposure to discomfort does not break the mind, it strengthens it. When someone deliberately chooses to resist an impulse, delay gratification, or sit with boredom instead of escaping it, the brain begins to recalibrate its reward system. The craving does not disappear immediately. In fact, at first it often intensifies, but something important happens underneath that tension. The dependence on constant stimulation starts to loosen. The brain begins to remember that satisfaction does not only come from immediate relief, but also from endurance, patience, and effort. This is where real recovery begins, not through avoidance of temptation, but through the gradual rebuilding of control over it. Small acts of resistance become powerful signals, not checking the phone immediately, allowing boredom to exist without filling it, choosing a difficult task instead of an easy distraction. Each of these actions reconditions the brain's response to discomfort. Over time, what once felt unbearable begins to feel manageable, and what once felt necessary begins to feel optional. This shift is subtle, but profound. It is the moment when behavior stops being dictated by impulse and starts being guided by intention again. The mind regains a sense of space between stimulus and reaction. But there is a critical misunderstanding many people fall into at this stage. They assume discipline is about restriction, when in reality, it is about freedom from automatic behavior patterns. And once this is understood, a deeper transformation becomes possible. Because mastering discomfort is not the final goal. It is the doorway to something much greater. The final principle reveals what happens when control over dopamine is no longer external, but internal. Master your dopamine. Reclaim your life. Control was never about the world outside. It was always about the impulses within. At the center of every habit, every distraction, and every moment of lost focus lies the same invisible force. The brain's reward system shaping behavior through anticipation and relief. When this system operates without awareness, life begins to feel reactive, fragmented, and increasingly difficult to steer in a meaningful direction. But when it becomes visible, everything changes. Mastery does not come from eliminating pleasure. It comes from understanding its cost. Every quick reward carries a hidden trade-off: attention, patience, motivation, or emotional stability. Once this becomes clear, choices stop being automatic and start becoming deliberate. A new kind of clarity emerges when stimulation is no longer constant. Simple moments begin to recover their depth. Conversations feel more present. Tasks regain their sense of purpose. Even boredom, once avoided at all costs, becomes a space where creativity and reflection can return. This is not a return to the past. It is a reconstruction of balance. The brain does not need less life. It needs fewer extremes, fewer artificial spikes, fewer cycles of overstimulation followed by emptiness. When those patterns are reduced, natural motivation begins to reappear without force. One of the most powerful realizations from Dopamine Nation is that freedom is not the absence of desire. It is the ability to choose which desires to follow and which to let pass. That distinction separates reaction from intention, and intention is where control returns. By recognizing how modern pleasures quietly shape attention, it becomes possible to interrupt the cycle before it takes over. Not through perfection, but through awareness repeated consistently over time. Each small decision to pause, resist, or delay becomes a form of recovery. Not dramatic, not instant, but cumulative. And that is where transformation actually happens. Because the goal was never to escape pleasure. The goal was to stop being controlled by it. And once that control returns, something deeper becomes available. A life guided not by impulse, but by direction. And this is where the loop finally closes. The same pleasures that once seemed harmless were never just entertainment. They were shaping the mind all along. The only question that remains is whether that shaping continues unconsciously or finally becomes something you choose.